Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today I am honored to be here with the scholars from the edge of time, Nicholas Diak and Michele Brittany. Oh, scholars, thank you for granting us your presence, and how go things with you?
Well, greetings, Hercules. It's going well. We are managing to survive the many days of
115-degree heat.
Wow.
yeah. In fact, yesterday, I think it was 118 in Phoenix, which was the highest, and broke records. And I think we're on day 27 with plus 110-degree temperatures.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which I think will play an important part in our discussion later tonight when we get to it with climate change and temperature stuff.
Definitely.
But that's in a bit, though.
Yes, we will be touching on the ecology and El Niños and all that kind of thing. So it seems appropriate.
Can't wait to hear what you have to share.
But as always, we're always working on individual projects and joint projects as well. So figure give you a little update on the goings-ons with us.
Great.
I'll go ahead and start. I've got show and tell. So these will probably be written up at my website soon, but I like to read a lot of Neo-Peplum comics, and I always, whenever they pop up on Kickstarter, I buy them because, I've already written about issue 1 and 2, but I got issue 3 of Born of Blood, which is, a daughter of a Spartan king who's going out doing Spartan things. And then issue 2 of, that's kind of reflective, but that's okay. SPQR. I have to revisit this one. I don't remember the first issue very well. It's been a couple years. So yeah, 2 new Neo-Peplum comics that have come into my possession after kickstarting them a while ago. So stay tuned at my website when I review them or interview the creators or something.
Nice covers, by the way.
Oh yeah. Well,
We've had many a conversation about the covers for some of these independent comic books and the fact that they will do, I don't know, like 20 different versions
Yes.
of covers, and some with clothes, some without, and whether they're very pertinent to the story or not. So we've had
The comic book industry for a while, that when there was so much speculation and there were millions of covers, and it was hard to keep track of what you had and didn't have because looking at the cover.
I think it's in the 90s and even like today, that's still a practice with major publishers of like there's like retail incentive covers and whatnot. But on Kickstarter, they take it like a step further. So like be like, hey, here's our indie comic. We've got 10 different covers, but within those 10 covers, we have nude variants of those covers. And then within those nude variants of those covers, we have virgin covers, which are, no text or logos on it. It's just pure pinup. So there'll be like 30 different covers, depending on, do you want logos or not? Do you want clothes or not? And it's not just a one-off. It's like a lot of indie comics that use Kickstarter as their more fulfillment platform to go that route, where it's instead of you'll look at their page, like the Kickstarter campaign, be like, here's like 2 sample pages, bing, bing, and now here's scroll 20, 30 covers of incentives and stuff. So the emphasis is definitely on the cover art to lure you in like a siren of the sea.
that was nice.
I thought it was pretty good.
That was what you said. Thank you.
Well, I am working on essays for like Nick with the Emmanuel project that he has, but I'm also working with Simon Bacon, who is editor on several upcoming books related to like the undead and undead superheroes. So I'll be working on mummy focused essays. So and I just recently, actually, we both just recently submitted cat focused essays to Simon for a companion collection. So,
and we talked about our various essays on a episode of Scholars like a month or 2 ago.
That's right, we did. So if people are kind of like, what are they talking about? They could definitely refer back to that episode and hear more about that project. I think the book will probably be out. I'm kind of thinking next year, probably mid next year.
Awesome.
Yeah. What about you? What do you got next on your list?
Emmanuel book, getting that out to different publishers, to see who will pick it up. But more pressing on that, we have a colleague that's presented at our academic conference, the AnradCon conference. His name is Michael Duda. He started a dark horror literary fiction magazine, and his second issue is about to come out. And it's got an essay of mine in it. Actually, he reached out to me like, "Hey, Nikki, got something for me?" And I'm like, "I do. I have a paper I presented at a convention, our conference a year or two ago on Rene Girard and Lovecraft. It's been one of those on again, off again projects I want to do something bigger on, but I had a shorter form presentation on a mimetic reading of H.P. Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu, and I, just edited it so it was less presentation and more essay, and sent it off to him, and that's basically coming out immediately. So very happy that this has been a very productive year, I guess, of things coming out. So I've been very happy with that.
Yeah, and then Nicholas and I will be participating as panelists for the upcoming CocoCon, which is it's a local convention that's focused on science fiction, fantasy, and horror genres.
It's like an old school fan con that you would have had like in the 60s through 80s.
So it's a smaller convention, probably around 200 to 300 attendees. We've two of the panels will be horror oriented, and the third one is weird westerns. We're also going to be vending there, which is a first for us to actually vend.
Yeah, despite I think we've been writing in some capacity for 10 years about, we've never actually have vended or had a booth or something at like a convention or a conference. So yeah.
So this will be our first time, and so we submitted a rather large order to McFarland last week, and we're going to have quite a few of our books there that we'll be able to sign. But then I've also been working on starting a business with paper crafts, specifically like handmade journals and things like that. So I'll be also selling journals, and I am donating to their charity auction 3 journals that'll be available, and all the proceeds go to help an animal defense fund here in Arizona.
I wish you success with that. That's very noble, and that's very much needed. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think that's quite a bit of what I have. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. That's been my primary focus.
We just did a podcast on our HP Lovecast podcast with an author editor named Chelsea Pumpkins.
Mhm.
She did an anthology on 90s centric horror. So Tamagotchis and America Online and JNCO pants, everyone. So that'll drop at the end of the month. And I think the last thing I have, this is a maybe. This depends if I can carve out time and do it quick enough. But there is a Three Stooges zine that's about to start, and they're taking papers. And I'm like, well, there's some Peplum Three Stooges out there. They happen to meet a Hercules, and they also have, individual episodes in ancient, Greece and ancient Egypt. So it's on the, I've already put down my brainstorm and ideas and stuff. I'm not the biggest Three Stooges fan, not at all, but, any chance to write Peplum in a weird way, I will certainly do it. So the due date for that's mid-August. So I don't know if I'll make it or not, but I'll try to see if I could do a, parody Peplum in Three Stooges, like very short form essay to submit. So if I do, cross fingers, and maybe I'll have an essay in a Three Stooges zine.
There you go. That would be different.
Great. Yes. Wow.
Got to continue the Peplum scholarship in every avenue I can. And if that's one of the outlets, so be it.
Yeah, I wish I had time to participate as well, but I'm busy making stuff. So I'm not going to be able to address the Three Stooges and the Mummy this time around. Maybe next time.
Have you guys thought of editing your shows and putting them out like on disc or something, or?
No, we haven't. We've actually had some other ideas, writing wise, but not actually editing our things together. Mm-mm.
Because you guys are very entertaining and very informed and very thorough.
We've toyed with the idea maybe in the future, like doing like shorts on YouTube or something. But you know, we juggle so much. The ideas come, some of them get realized, some of them stay on the back burner. You know, other things we want to do is like more essays, you know, essays for DVDs and stuff like that. So we'll see. But you know, we're still cranking out what we can, and you know, we have, I think, way more successes than not realizations.
Yeah, I think for the most part. Also, the fact that, you know, as you know, Hercules, we bought a house, and with that comes a nice long list of, you know, house projects that should be done. And so that's also been taking, you know, time away from other things. So
before we bought the house, we had dreams of fancy of like we would have, you know, the command center room with the tables there that Michele and I will meet at to plan our, you know, projects and realize thing. And well, that hasn't quite happened, but it's more of, hey, let's sit on the futon and what do you want to do for our next podcast? So it's almost there.
very informal, you know, not at all what we were envisioning.
I
but
wanted the
that's okay.
bulletin board with the pins stuck in it and everything. So
And we'll get there. someday.
maybe next year.
You will, and I want to see pictures. when there.
Definitely, we'll have to share behind the scenes type of, you
And
know,
share the
little
pictures
featurette.
from vending at the convention too.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we'll do that. And in fact, I think the resident artist will again be Gilead, who did the real nice painting that Nick bought of the woman fighting the tentacle monster.
I've shown that off. I must have.
Yeah, I think you've seen a picture of that before. Yeah, so he'll be there. You know, maybe Nick will be buying another painting.
You know what I should do is whenever we're on Hercules's shows, I should do a quick swap, the tiki artwork from behind us with the sword and sorcery barbarian woman fighting the Cthulhu tentacles. So that would be the background. So let's keep swapping up.
Yes, we might have to do that next month.
That would be awesome. And before we proceed with Atlantis, I will share with you that new Conan books are coming out. I haven't read them yet, but I have 3 of them. One of them looks like an official release, and the other 2, because Conan's in the public domain, I believe, are like, not official releases. But the Conan fiction is starting to come back, and Conan is appearing in comics. He was in a series called The Cimmerian, and then Valeria had a 5-issue run also. So the Hyborian Age is slowly reemerging.
I think Marvel is the one putting out current Conan comics. I know they were doing it back in the 70s, and then Dark Horse was doing Conan for a while. But yeah, I believe Marvel now is the one that's doing Conan again, if I'm not mistaken.
They're no longer doing it. They were doing it for a while, but they had Conan on the Savage Avengers.
Okay.
So they killed it for me.
And I know Red Sonja, I think Dynamite has her right now, and they're cranking out like Red Sonja versus Deja Thoris, because they put out all John Carter stuff too. I have not dived into those yet. We haven't really been comic book shopping lately, but yeah, I know of them, and I like Red Sonja. I like Deja Thoris. There's a box there. It's got a giant Deja Thoris statue that will someday be on a shelf that doesn't exist yet, but
yes, it has to be cat proofed first.
It's got to be cat proof.
Yeah, and then it'll be out on the shelf. So
go Conan.
Yeah, that's actually great.
It didn't sink in, but at think the last time we talked with Hercules, I brought up I was in Weird Tales, and you had said, you have that lineage now with Robert E. Howard. I'm like, I do. That's really cool. I didn't think of it that way. And that is cool.
There's quite a lineage with the Weird Tales, and from Lovecraft to many others. So yeah, it's a very nice connection.
Smooth napping.
Yeah. Well,
are you ready to dive deep into Atlantis, the Lost Continent?
I think we're ready. Hercules, are you ready to hear all about it?
Ready to. I'm sitting on a steady chair and I'm holding onto a sturdy desk. So I'm just
very good.
So change of pace. I'm not doing the intro tonight. This episode is Michelle's doing, and I don't mean that like I mean interesting. So Michele gets to lead the Peplum talk this time.
Oh dear. I thought this was a partnership. Well, I think I'll preempt our conversation by saying that I've actually had a many decades interest in Atlantis. And as we were all talking, and I'm going to say the green room before starting to record, I had recalled a film about Atlantis in which it's destructive, it is destroyed at the tail end of the film. And so Nick did due diligence, always to say, hey, I see it's this film or that film when I can't remember the name of something. And so there's not a lot of Atlantis focused films out there.
Yeah.
So we kind of thought, Nick said, well, maybe it's this. And I saw a trailer and I was like, well, maybe. And we did watch the film, and I can definitely tell you it was not the film. But we are still going to discuss Atlantis, the Lost Continent, that came out in 1961. Just a quick rundown on some details with regards to the film. It was directed by George Powell, and he is also the director of Tom Thumb from 1958. Rod Taylor's The Time Machine from 1960, one of my favorite films. The Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm from 1962, and Seven Faces of Dr. Lao from 1964. But the thing with Powell is that he also produced several sci-fi fantasy films such as Destination Moon, When Worlds Collide, The War of the Worlds, another actually brilliant film out there, and Conquest of Space. What's interesting, though, is that he was also an animator and developed the Puppet Tunes. And over the years, he did receive a number of industry awards, including a Golden Plate Award from the American Academy of Achievement, as well as a San Diego Comic-Con Inkpot Award. And I think that was like around 1975. I think he died in 1980. So this he was around at that time. Stars of the film include Anthony Hall. His real name was Sal Ponte. He played Demetrios, our hero. Joyce Taylor, who was Princess Antilia. She did a few films, but she mostly had a career on television. John Dahl, he played Zarin. He was our resident villain. He had a larger role in Spartacus, the Stanley Kubrick film, as well as Hitchcock's Rope. He also did some TV, but Atlantis, The Lost Continent was his last theatrical film. William Bill Smith, Nick, you might remember him. We met him.
And he's Conan's dad. We were talking about Conan just a minute ago.
Yeah, he was a captain of the guard. As Nick just mentioned, he was in Conan the Barbarian, but also numerous films spanning from 1942 through 2020. What an incredible career. And as we said, we met him at a Hollywood Collector show. Do you remember what you had signed by him?
Yeah, he signed my copy of.
I know it's going to be something.
It's something bad. I believe it was Cyber Tracker 1, starring Dawn the Dragon Wilson.
Oh, there you go. There we go. I, on the other hand, bought his book of poetry. He was also a poet. Other actors was Edward Platt. He played Azar, the high priest. Most people might remember him as Chief from Get Smart. I knew I recognized the face. And so as soon as I saw that he was from that, I was like, yep, okay, I know who he is. But he also did several popular films like Rebel Without a Cause, North by Northwest, and the original Cape Fear. I also want to mention Frank D. Kova. He was Sonoy, the astrologer, and he was a character actor. But if you see him, you're gonna like, oh, yeah, I recognize him. He was again a character actor. So I'll have some other bits to talk about regarding kind of behind the scenes and the stars, but we'll interweave that a bit later. So I know you're all waiting on bated breath here for the plot.
Yeah, what happens? What happens to Atlantis? What happens to Atlantis?
So here is a plot synopsis, a little on the long side, but I wanted to hit the narrative beats since we'll be, kind of doing a deep discussion. So it opens, Atlantis, the Lost Continent opens with a voiceover prologue in which the audience receives a simplified history lesson of the origins of ancient civilizations from the advanced Atlantis civilization, an island that was once situated in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Note, Atlantis was first mentioned in Plato's works and is considered either one, a fictional island meant as an allegory to the ideal nation state or republic, or it is an actual location of a lost ancient advanced civilization. Okay, back to our film. A Greek fisherman, a young, handsome Demetrius, and his father come upon a broken up raft carrying a prostrate woman. They later learn is Princess Antilia from the advanced Atlantean civilization and island. Demetrius and his father return to their home with her, and after a time, the princess awakens. She is none too pleased to be wearing a basic tunic rather than her colorful silks. She is haughty and rude to Demetrius and his father and wants to return to Atlantis, the mystical place beyond the pillars of Hercules. The father says no, and she is not accustomed to being told no. The fishermen return, return to their fishing, and while they are away, she is dressed in her finery and a spring in her step. She tries to snare Demetrius with honey by asking nicely to be taken home. While the young man has obviously already succumbed to her beauty, he already had their future planned out. She stays with him, they get married, and live happily ever after. In the Greek village, of course. Nope, wrong answer for now. We have at least 80 minutes to fill with adventure. In the middle of the night, Princess Antilia steals the men's fishing boat. As she starts to sail off, Demetrius catches up with her and reluctantly agrees to sail for 1 month. And if they cannot find Atlantis, she promises to return to Greece and marry Demetrius. With the month almost at an end, a giant fish-looking submarine appears alongside Demetrius' boat. The metal ship is piloted by Zarin, a dashing tall blonde who appears to be happy to see the princess, and less so Demetrius. The group travels to the main port of Atlantis, and crowds rush to welcome the princess. We never found out why she was gone. While Demetrius is separated from her and quietly taken prisoner for his trouble to work as a miner of crystals that power Atlantis. While life isn't planning out for Demetrius, Antilla is learning that her father, King Kronos, may be wearing a physical crown, but the power is sitting with Zarin and his sidekick, Sonoy, the astrologer and court sorcerer. Sonoy advises Zarin the time is ripe for the usurper to conquer the world as they know it, the countries defining the Mediterranean region. Antilia seeks counsel from Anzar, a kindly high priest who believes in a higher god. Note, while Christianity is not specifically stated, it is implied that Azar worships God, not the gods of the ancient civilizations. He tries to reconcile the princess and Demetrius because the priest understands geology and that the island's volcano will eventually erupt and wipe out the island out of existence. Demetrius does not reconcile. He is stubborn and finds himself in the house of fear, where an Atlantean practices science. Well, sort of science, experimenting on slaves to see if he can create man beasts. Just before Demetrius is to become a man pig, he is taken to a large crowded coliseum to undergo the ordeal of fire and water. Demetrius must fight an ogre in a pit of fire and then in a pool of water. Basically, it's the same pit, just repurposed. Demetrius is victorious and secures his freedom and into the care of Azar. Azar explains the signs of doom to Demetrius, who finds a way to help, or really hinder, Zardan's plans for world domination of the ancient world. The young man gains Zardan's trust, but not Sonoy's. So for a while, Demetrius is able to make the lives of the slaves more comfortable because they are all on the same page. Thwart Zardan and save humanity. Eventually, Sonoy reveals Demetrius' motives, and on cue, the skies darken, the island shakes, and the volcano sets off a destructive course. Zardan is hungry for power, even if it means using his crystal ray on fleeing Atlanteans and slaves. Demetrius finds Antilla with her father in the throne room, and he carries her away. Azar attacks Zardan, and in a fight to the death, the out-of-control weapon bursts a ray in their direction, killing them. Demetrius and Attila flee with his boat just as Atlantis is uprooted and turned over in the ocean, eventually disappearing completely. Tying up nicely with the opening prologue, the various survivors flee, taking the story of Atlantis with them, eventually becoming legend over the centuries and the millenniums. The end. There we go.
Wow.
So was that not epic?
I was wondering what they ate for that month in the boat, like.
Well, now that's an interesting point because Nick mentioned the same point, and she actually had time to fill the boat with lots of fruits and vegetables and things like that, and they probably fished and things like that. So they surprisingly they actually had quite a bit of food.
Well, if you want to dig into the weeds here, she probably only filled the boat up with enough food for just herself one
Probably.
way,
Yeah.
while his plan is now 2 people forward and backwards. So they should have starve-a-rooney there, unless you get into a big Iliad style epic quest there.
My thought is they probably starved on the way back because they were having to leave the island very quickly. And she wasn't planning their escape. So the woman is well organized, one way at least. So with that, Nicholas, your initial thought, what did you think of the film?
As campy as the movie is, and as campy as your plot makes it out to be, I liked it. I thought it was great. It was very, in one way, it was extremely kind of predictable. It's the bad guy. Oh, he's going to get put in jail. But then it went in crazy directions I did not see coming at all. And we'll get to those in a second. But the movie was really good at being, I wouldn't say psychotronic, but bordering on that with how outlandish it would go. Instead of just being a kind of run-of-the-mill Atlantean peplum, it threw in like weird science and biblical peplum stuff, and it just, so it threw a lot of curveballs at me, and I respect it for that. So I enjoyed it for that. I dug it.
Mhm. Well, as I said earlier, this was not the movie that I remembered, but I still enjoyed it. Maybe not quite to the same degree as Nick, but I definitely really enjoyed the curveballs and the fact that it went into you know, kind of early science as well as kind of pseudoscience with the man experimenting on man beasts, and yeah, kind of, you know, a bit of that. Also the biblical, you know, I
Yeah.
wasn't expecting that.
Halfway through the movie, it turned not like full blown, you know, revolt of the slaves biblicalness here, but just out of the blue, it just, you know, it turned into, yeah, our Atlantean gods are false. There's one true God. I'm like, where did you come from? And,
Yeah.
and it's weird because, you know, it's the priest is supposed to be kind of the moral center of this Atlantis, but you know, the Atlantis that is depicted here is very I don't want to say debauchery, but they're definitely letting their hubris going to get to them. So
Definitely, and especially when, you know, as I was growing up, you know, I always had the, you know, I always held the belief that Atlantis was a civilization that was advanced. It had, you know, advanced knowledge. I'm not, the crystal ray is an interesting concept, but I mean, I think that's more, you know, allegorical to the advanced technology aspect, but, you know, I don't believe to that extent it was, but I definitely believe them to have been an advanced civilization, and they had, I think mathematical, geological, and understanding of nature type of knowledge.
yeah, the technology depicted in this film is, it is inconsistent. Like you can have crystal powered submarines and crystal powered doomsday lasers, but what about, you know, the day-to-day life of the folks, which is still very antiquity-ish, you know, wearing the tunics, carrying a sword, I have a torch, you know, there's some like weird science in the background of some scenes, but it's like it's inconsistently applied technology, which I'm okay with. I was trying to think, what kind of technology is this? It's not like steampunk or diesel punk. I toyed with the idea, maybe it's crystal punk, but I think the period the movie, you know, was shot in, it makes it feel atomic punk, even though it's not an atomic age. I mean, it is an atomic age film, but
There's definitely, I think, you know, a kind of 20,000, is it 20,000 Leagues Under the
very
Sea with
Jules Verne-ish.
yeah, so I definitely think that there's some influence of that idea of the Nautilus, because this metal fish definitely has an otherworldly type of advanced technology that is definitely out of place for the entire film.
This is, that's the thing, the curveballs the movie throws at us, they're
Mhm.
all things that the movie could really lean into to explore even further, but
Mhm.
it's a 90-minute, you know, genre film, so it doesn't do it, which I think that's what holds it back from being a great film, is it posits a lot of good ideas and narrative ideas that it just can't hold up to. So like example, Michele mentioned earlier, the House of Fear, you know, that there's this mad scientist type character who's taking slaves, experimenting on them to turn them into like half men, half beasts. Well, as soon as we're watching it, I'm like, it's called House of Fear. I mean, last year we watched Island of Lost Souls from 1932, which is based on Island Dr. Monroe, that has House of Pain. And it's the exact same thing. You've got Dr. Monroe taking people in there, performing experiments, and I'm going to turn them into human, you know, and that's the focus of the movie, is that, you know, that's Dr. Monroe. So the, you know, the hour and a half long that movie is, you know, 5-minute abridged in Atlantis Lost Continent, which, you know, it's cool that they throw that in there. That's neat. I see, you know, the textual, you know, influence of it, but at the same time, it's like, do you need it? You know, could you have actually excised that from the movie and bolster up other parts of the movie? So, you know, it's give or take. I appreciate it being in there, but
Mhm.
I can contribute something to this conversation.
let's do it.
I've been an occultist for much of my life, and I started fairly young. Back in the 1970s, according to occultism, or pop occultism at least, the Atlanteans had crystal technology.
Mhm.
They had this giant crystal that provided energy to the whole island, and something happened. There was like an accident, like in a power plant, but with the crystal, and the crystal wound up destroying Atlantis. And also the half men, they came, that comes right out of Edgar Casey's story of Atlantis.
Mm.
Said that by doing experiments, the Atlanteans created like intelligent animals,
Mhm.
and they'd evolved them and they made them into servants or slaves. And they even had, he described like a rehabilitation program to help evolve them further into like humanity, you know, that there were charitable efforts underway to address the plight of these half beasts.
That is very interesting. Would you say that that belief, that ideology was around in 1960? Do you think that would have influenced George Powell and his ideas of the stories?
I would think so, because I was studying occultism, like, you know, pretty deeply in like the very early 70s. That's when I started. So I imagine that some of the ideas I was hearing, because they seemed entrenched in the minds of the occultists that I was interacting with, might have come out of the pop culture occultism of the 60s or the 50s, or, you know, even earlier.
Yeah, I definitely recall, and I went back and looked because I can remember watching Leonard Nimoy's In Search of, and he had a few episodes that was on Atlantis or the Benemy Wall. There was Mel Harris, his crystal skull that he, you know, found. But I did discover that those were late 1970s when that was discussed. So this is good to hear, because I really felt like there was probably a timeline in there regarding why some of these things were in the film. So that's very helpful. Thank you. That was insightful. So
Well, in this movie, though, the giant crystal doesn't power Atlantis, although it could. It's used as a doomsday weapon. And I have to throw out there, because it is comical. The main villain in this, Zarin, is like the most clichéist, cartoonish villain. Seriously, all he's missing is like the mustache to twirl and like a puppy to kick, because he checks all the other boxes of like a main villain. Like you know, it's like I want power and gold over, you know, loyalty, and this everything he says and does is just screams, I'm like the most, you know, cliched villain. So when it comes to the end of the film, when Atlantis is burning and lava and poisonous gases are coming up, you know, everyone's going to, you know, die. You know, what does he do? He looks around, he's like, I still got my space laser I haven't even used yet. I'm going to hop on it and start shooting people. I mean, that's pretty evil. I mean, they're all going to die anyway, but you had to do it yourself. So he's on there looking through his binocular, laughing maniacally as he shoots boats and other people. I mean, that I like it because it's seriously like Boris and Natasha level, like cartoon villainry, and you know, I'm okay with that. Usually villains in peplum films, they're not so over the top like that. You usually like, I'm the scheming, you know, guy that took over the country or whatnot. So, you know, in those films, the hero is way more memorable than the villains are. In this one, I think it's the opposite. I think our hero is he's a pretty guy. You know, his hair, despite, just like we talked about Ursus in the Valley of the Lions, where Ursus has like the well-coiffed hair that never gets messed up. Despite our hero here being thrown into the slave pits and doing hard labor, he still has immaculate hair. That's his feature, immaculate hair through the entire film. So I don't know. I don't buy him as a hero as much, but Zarin is just all over the map, like Jack Palance levels of villainry, like in Hot the Slayer.
I saw this movie a long time ago. I remember Demetrius, the name, and a few of this, but I don't remember that villain, although I should from from what you're describing. So I got the film if I still have it and watch it.
The weird thing is he's not introduced as the villain. I mean, he
No.
saves everyone with his sub. He's like friendly for everyone. Like, oh, maybe he's like, Princess Antillia's like, loyal servant or trusted guide or anything. And so when Demetrius gets captured, because he's going to get captured. That's
Yeah.
just the way those types of movies play out. The hero gets captured, they save the main person, and the king is like, I have plans for you. I'm going to marry you off to someone else. That guy's rubbish. I mean, that's where this movie goes. It's kind of predictable, but it's like at that moment, all of a sudden 180. That's when Zarin is now, I'm really the bad guy. I'm controlling the king. I don't know how he controls the king, but he does.
Yeah, and I think that was, I think that was a gap in the narrative, like I mentioned in the plot, is that we don't even know why Princess Antilia left Atlantis.
Yeah, why is she on a raft in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah, where, she's obvious past the pillars of Hercules, and she's near Greece. I mean, she has to be pretty near Greece for the fishermen to find her. And I think it's just kind of unclear. Now, she knows that she was meant or should be partnered with Zarin, but she obviously doesn't really care for him.
And he doesn't really, because usually in these types of films, the main villain's like, I will make you love me eventually, my love, and we will rule, and whatever.
And he never has interest in her.
Really, no.
I mean, and again, I would say that that's where this movie does deviate from a lot of the other types of films of the era, and the storytelling in this.
And to kind of go off that, the only person that's lusting or whatever for the princess is our hero. And usually when we bring up the subject of body and peplums, and there's always a very sexual element. This movie is pretty sexless. I mean, in the very, very beginning, Demetrius and the princess, they snuggle up on the boat and then cut later and they're still snuggling. So it's implied off-screen sex.
Yeah.
But that's like in the first 15 minutes of the film. After that, it's, there's no belly dancing. There's no, super thin garments that accentuate bodies or anything. It's very conservative. And maybe that kind of ties in with the depiction of Atlantis in this as a more conservative, if not maybe fascist type society. I mean, they're very xenophobic. All foreigners are evil. We got to put them in the slave pits.
They're all made into slaves. Yeah.
Again, no one. There's no sexuality or anything there. What else did I have here? They want to preemptively conquer other countries, and I have to say, that's probably not just Zarin wanting to do that. Everyone pretty much falls in line with him fairly easy. So those kind of conquering attitudes are with the citizens. They gather in the arena. They want to see bloodlust. They want to conquer other civilizations or anything. So this is, and also the main princess, she's kind of a bee in the very beginning. So overall, the impression of Atlantis is these people, except for the high priest, is they're not nice. Maybe again, their hubris. Maybe it's good that they got sunk by a volcano.
Yeah, and it seems like the real kind of, I'm going to say, chemistry of relationships between characters, I would say, is Demetrius and the older man. I can't remember that character's name. He is turned into a man beast. And he is slowly becoming more of a beast than a man. And Demetrius feels very, very strongly about this older man who is kind of his surrogate father.
Father away from my other father. Uncle or whatever.
Yeah, and really that's, to me, like one of the strongest relationships that's portrayed is more this father and son. And of course, we have Demetrius and his father at the beginning, and that is something that kind of runs through. Attila you know, when she returns to Atlantis, she mentions that, you know, her father used to be very strong. And, you know, it's implied that she's been gone for quite a while. And so one has to kind of wonder, where did she go? Because it seems like she was gone much longer than a month, because
she had her own Homer's Odyssey.
I guess maybe that was going to be the sequel.
Yeah, the prequel.
Or the prequel. Yeah.
You know what, side note? That would be kind of cool. An Atlantean princess on a cruise having adventures that takes 10 years to do.
Yes, definitely.
I would watch that. I
There's
would.
a book idea.
What's that?
There's a book idea.
I think there is.
Yeah.
So I'll bring up a couple peplum things in this, because as weird, as much like weird science and science fiction-y as this film is, because it is categorized as science fiction, not peplum. And this movie came out early 60s, and I would say it's a rare instance of American peplum, because there isn't a lot of American peplum. But, you know, 2 years later, we get Jason and the Argonauts. And in fact, both of those movies have King Neptune or Triton coming out of the water, except in this film, he's like, I got a spear, I'm going to stab you, while in Jason the Argonauts, like, go for it, I will hold back the cliffs from rocks from getting you. So
and
a little
just,
different.
Yeah, and just to add to that, that was actually a dream or vision that Demetrius had. So, you know, it's just a you know, a vision, probably him hungry.
So I'd say because it's American peplum, you know, it's doing things a lot different than Italian peplum. And, you know, there's American imports of Italian peplum and then Americanified with edits and stuff. Now, this is purely American produced peplum. So of course, focus on bodies. Our hero's shirtless. He's not a strong man, but, you know, he is oiled and attractive. This is a slave revolt film. You have a slave uprising of everyone turning against the Atlantean guards and Zarin. That definitely Grecian and antiquity. So I think they actually integrate the weird science and this muddling of just broad antiquity. In fact, on Wikipedia, they mention, like, you know, they brought in like costumes from like Ben-Hur and the robe and all this other stuff. And someone told the director, you know, these are all from different periods of time, you know, kind of like the T-Rex and the Stegosaurus didn't exist at the same time. And, you know, the director's like, who cares? And I'm like, I don't care, actually, because, you know, all the peplum, regardless if it's Grecian or Roman or whatever, are, you know, they all bleed together. So it's all
That's an American ignorance, by the way.
Yes.
You know, we're kind of ignorant with some of that, but
so I'm okay with this. You know, we've talked about this many times where, you know, all these characters can be a Hercules type character that transcends, you know, time and space, can go anywhere. So I kind of see Atlantis as, well, why not? Let it be the melting pot of all these different eras and eras and whatnot. I would say it's also a disaster film, which was kind of popular at the time, you know, earthquake and whatnot. So it puts it in a very Pompeii peplum film, because there's quite a few, you know, Pompeii, you know, exploding Mount V, you know, exploding, and Vesuvius. Thank you. I can't say that. So I'd say, you know, if you've watched a Pompeii type peplum or a Pompeii documentary, or if you read the new peplum that has an essay about Pompeii peplum in it, I think this movie, you know, borrows heavily from that. And then, yeah, the random biblical peplum at like the very, you know, center of the film. So, you know, it's a different style of peplum because it's Americanified, but it has all those kind of tropes. An arena battle where instead of, you know, okay, this is where I think it could have done a little better. You have
a lot better.
Well, you have the scientist guy that's making man beasts. What you do is you have him make like a minotaur or something big and beefy. And so I'm going to go fight in the, you know, the arena in the trial of water and fire. And you could fight any sort of like mythical monster there. No, instead they get like a really like big dude that's, you called him an ogre, but you know, this is not like a Herculean strongman. He's just a big guy that, you know, it's more, I want to say played for comedy, you know, it's, oh, he's a big guy, so I can go between his feet and cause him to fall and stuff. And I get it in a cartoony way, but you had all this weird science type stuff going on. You make a crazy gladiator beast from there, then you put them in the pit for them to fight. There you go.
Well, I don't think he was playing it for comedy. But I think I think maybe he was thinking along the lines, you know, Pal was thinking along the lines is that it needed to be somewhat realistic. But it lost the idea of tension and this very difficult ordeal or trial that Demetrius had to overcome.
This
And I
trial
think-
is not supposed to be survived by anyone. So you're
Yeah.
thinking, oh, this is going to be good. This is Indiana Jones and Last Crusade trial good. And it turns out to be,
Well, it turns out to be like this triangle shaped pit that is probably 5 feet deep, maybe 6 feet at most. And I was watching, I'm like, why didn't he just jump out? You know, at different points so, you know, unfortunately, it didn't translate very well as far as being this really epic battle to be part of the battles that you've come to, you know, expect in a peplum film.
yeah, there's not a lot of like sword play and fighting in this film. It's not quite toga and sandal, but it's not quite sword and sandal either. It's right in the middle. But yeah, that's the one gladiator scene, and it's, you know, the main character, you know, he's not a strong guy, so you know you're supposed to play up his agileness, but that doesn't work. But I'm like, okay, second part is the pit's filling with water. He's a fisherman, he can use that to his advantage. Well, he doesn't really do that either.
No, not really. You know, to me, I felt more like, you know, it's part of his hero's journey, because to me, I read him as Demetrius as being more of a you know, kind of streetwise, you know, a fisherman that has average strength, but he is not a strong man. He's not set apart by a superiority. He's just an everyman type person that I think was meant to be somebody that most of the audience could identify with. But he also needed to have some sort of hero's journey. And so this ordeal was meant to transition him from being the slave into a free citizen of Atlantis. And, you know, it does that, but, you know, it could have been more effective and more epic, particularly since, you know, what we haven't mentioned is that this movie actually, well, although Nick mentioned about, you know, certain props and wardrobe being, you know, recycled in this film, there was also footage that was recycled in this film, such as, I think it was Quo Vadis.
Yeah.
And the Naked Jungle. And so what he did is he had stock footage of this huge Coliseum. And it doesn't translate well when you have this little pit.
Tiny pit.
Yeah, tiny pit. So you know, and unfortunately, you know, critics did call him out on the fact that he was using, you know, a footage from an actual really good film. I think it was Oscar nominated and things like that. So, you know, it's just, I think in ways his film was kind of ahead of time, like you mentioned, you know, disaster films that really came into popularity in the early, I'm going to say very, very late 60s into the early 70s, when you had like Earthquake, The Tower Inferno, and those kind of things that were ensemble casts.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of that early, you know.
Poseidon Adventure, Poseidon.
Yeah.
Eh?
Poseidon Adventure and others. So yeah, I think that
With that, I was going to say that this movie has its hand in a lot of pots. So I do want to list them off, because I think it works in the movie's favor, but at the same time brings it down because it's a little unfocused. But So like I said, it's a slave revolt peplum.
Mhm.
It deals with genetic engineering. It deals with toga and sandal style politics. It's a disaster film, which like we just saying, but also I would say it even predates the animals run amok genre that would happen in the 70s, because there's a big environmental message in this film. It's a survival film. You know, the first 15 minutes of the film, they're out in the ocean, and you know, there's those I'm stuck on a Life of Pi type movie or Robinson Crusoe type stuff. So the movie is like all over the map with genres, which I think for the most part, patchwork wise, it works. Some things don't get it as as much love as others, but I think it's cohesive enough. I like it. Those are all the curveballs, but yeah, it's not just a peplum. It is a disaster film peplum. It is a survival in the ocean peplum. It's a political peplum, and I think because we're kind of coming close to the hour, I was actually watching it, and like it's pretty relevant for today. The religious leaders, there's all these signs that something bad's going to happen. That animals are running away, crops are dying. There's the atmosphere is bad. And like that's like the beginning of Dante's Peak with Pierce Bronson. And climate change and stuff going on, and that's the like Plato, hubris lesson to the rest of the world. If you give into that, you will, crash and burn like Atlantis did. And well, here we are. Are we eating Plato's wisdom?
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah. I just want to kind of finish up on a couple of notes that the movie was noted for its special effects as well as its miniature work. Particularly with the use of the ancient Greek and Roman buildings, the use of Egyptian statues, particularly in the temple, the huge crystal ray weapon, a volcano. Those are just to kind of point out a few things. The stop motion animation in the film's prologue was actually developed by George Powell earlier in his career, so he reutilized that or incorporated that into this film. As far as critical success, generally the film did receive poor reviews, and critics suggested that audience avoid the film.
That's harsh. I think that's harsh.
Well, at the time. So even the recycling of footage did not escape a previewer screener, because they did do a preview screening. And apparently this reviewer had this to say that about their favorite scene. The scene where Robert Taylor saved Deborah Kerr from the fire was his favorite, which was referring to the stock footage from another film. Yeah. Like I said, George Powell went on to do other films that are more notable. But this, when we look at a person's career and his vision for his films, this had its place in his filmography.
I dug it.
And maybe I'll find the actual Atlantis film that I remembered from my childhood. And we'll talk about that one in the future.
I have a bunch of Atlantis films, so I'll look through my stack and I will send you, if I find pictures or images on Google, I'll send them to you. Maybe one of those is what you're looking for. And you guys brought me back to my childhood. I remember now watching this movie on a black and white TV with my family. And then my family liked the movie because it was about a Greek fisherman.
Yeah.
And back when I was growing up, there were actual fishing villages, there still might be, but there were a lot of them when I was growing up. So being a fisherman was a legitimate occupation. And they all knew that, Plato had written about Atlantis, so that was associated with the Greeks too. So there was a lot of conversation about what they knew or remembered from the Atlantis legend and all the wild theories that they brought to the table. So to them, this was a good film. And I remember they praised it and spent time talking about it, which is something they rarely talked about movies after we watched them. But for this film, they did. This inspired them to discuss it. And
that's great.
So thank you for bringing me down memory lane in my childhood.
Oh, wonderful.
Time for you to rewatch it, because the movie is in color and it's that pretty vibrant 60s I don't know if it's Technicolor or some Eastman color or whatever, but it's pretty vibrant. Revisit that.
And
Visited.
yeah, and I would say that, this is a good jumping off point to do further research on Atlantis and the various theories. I was actually surprised by how much Atlantis has been in pop culture and in our literature and things like that over within the last 100 years. So it's definitely worth, doing some more research. Go back to the old In Search of episodes. They're out there. And have a look at some of those as well.
I have a Facebook group on Mythic Atlantis. It's not very active. It has bursts of activity. So you're welcome to share there if you care to on your quest. And as we do our quest, because now I have a metaphysical group focused on Atlantis, I'll be sharing stuff, some of it strange and bizarre, like the elements of the movie. So let's have fun with Atlantis.
Definitely.
I want to thank both of you as always. It is a pleasure to be speaking with both of you. I always have a great time, and you guys are phenomenally awesome. So I look forward to our next conversation and wish you well in all your endeavors.
Thank you.
Wish you joyous journeys.
Thank you. An amazing adventure. Good night, all. And this should be up by tonight.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.